Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is an extra edition of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I'm joined by Michael Borkey. Everybody enjoys it when Michael comes on the show. We're in the bye week. We're going to get his thoughts. It's going to be pretty great. How you doing, Michael?
Man, I'm doing really well. Yeah, it's kind of depressing. I don't mean to bring the mood down halfway through the season.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just, when you think about it, you spend months and months waiting for it and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, and then halfway done.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. You think about, and you have numbers next to three of the teams that Ole Miss played against in the beginning of the season, because you don't even realize how good of an early part of that season it was, because they're 5-1. They get off to that start, but three of the teams that they played had numbers beside their names whenever they played them. And theoretically, it should get a little bit easier moving forward, at least on that aspect.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what a lot of people like to draw the parallels from seasons past and things like that. And the biggest difference to me in this Ole Miss team versus last year's Ole Miss team, similar start, all that stuff, really good out of the gate, climbed up the rankings. This Ole Miss team is battle tested. And they've done it in different ways, which I think is more impressive, honestly, than doing it the same way always. You're not going to get a group of 18 to 22-year-olds. Hell, you can't get NFL players to play at their absolute peak every single week. And they have found ways in multiple different ways in difficult situations to find wins and get to 5-1. Last year's Ole Miss team, as we learned, Kentucky was not the test that we thought it was at the time. And other things happened, but the schedule got more difficult, and we kind of learned what they actually were as opposed to what we thought they were. I think we have a much better grasp of what this Ole Miss team is and what it's capable of, despite not even putting a complete game together, which is a really encouraging thing. But what I go back to is the LSU game, honestly, where they were down 2 scores with just over 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. So midway through the fourth quarter, down 2 scores, facing a 3rd and long. It's 3rd and 10. Completed pass, score a touchdown, win the game. And that was after Alabama, and they caught a lot of heat after the way they played, justifiably so. And they get into that spot. How many other teams, not Ole Miss teams, but just teams in general, would have lost the game when LSU went up 9?
Oh, 95% of them, probably.
So many. And then the same thing with this Arkansas game. They were down in the fourth quarter against Arkansas. Ole Miss teams of the past would have lost that game. Ole Miss teams of the past would have lost to Tulane. I've said this on our show as well, but it bears repeating. I think it speaks to 3 things. I think it speaks to coaching. Very clearly speaks to coaching. When you have scored 1 fewer point in the fourth quarter than you have the first quarter, that speaks to coaching. It speaks to leadership, specifically quarterback, and it speaks to depth and team conditioning, honestly. I mean, they are able to put teams away and play their best ball late in games, and that's why they're sitting here at 5-1. I've been really impressed with how they've navigated the storm of the beginning of this season, especially when you look at where they were in the given games and how they responded during those games.
An interesting point. The difference between them being 5-1 and 6-0. This is how close Ole Miss probably is to 6-0. Is they're not very good in the middle 8 minutes of the game. The last 4 minutes before halftime, the first 4 minutes of the third quarter, they haven't been particularly good against good teams. That's where LSU made their run. That's where Alabama kind of separated in the second half. And that little nitpick thing, if this was Ole Miss teams in the past, okay, let's say I go way back. My first game watching Ole Miss was Steve Sloan's last. I go way back. And Ole Miss would legitimately be 2-4 last year. And most Ole Miss teams this season would have been 2-4. This Ole Miss team does have a little bit of fortitude about them. And going into the second half of the season, I did a video on Thursday. It was basically, can Ole Miss go 11-1? And we all know that it's going to be hard. You can't overlook opponents, yada, yada, yada. But this Ole Miss team is better positioned to make a special type run than even the 2021 team was with Matt Corral.
I am curious to see what the Watkins injury does to possibly derail that. But yes, and what I love about the way this back half of the season sets up, I know what Georgia is, and I know how difficult that is. And that's a free shot. That is as free shot as you can get. There are no expectations whatsoever. Go in there, play loose, and if you lose, you still have 10 wins in an Access Bowl.
You're in the Orange Bowl. You lose to just Georgia, and you're in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, and so I don't think that this team – I mean, based on what we've seen so far, the intestinal fortitude of this team I don't think will be fazed by expectations, and I don't think they will be fazed by stakes. And especially like this Auburn game, a lot of people are talking about, Hugh Freeze is going to want this game really bad, and that's true. Luckily for Ole Miss, they're in Baton Rouge this weekend. So you can't spend all this energy getting ready for Ole Miss when you're going to go get beat by LSU. At least I think today when this airs, I think they're going to lose that game and pretty handedly. But the emotions of that not only wouldn't phase this team anyway, but these guys don't know Hugh Freeze. They don't know the story of Hugh Freeze. I mean, maybe some students on campus are telling them, hey, Hugh Freeze he resigned from Ole Miss because of this, and isn't that funny and stuff like that. But they have no ties to it. They have no emotions in this game other than it's the next one. And I think that really benefits Ole Miss. The environment's not going to intimidate them. They've already played in Tuscaloosa, and they lost in Tuscaloosa, but they've already played in Tuscaloosa. The A&M game, should they beat Auburn and Vanderbilt, will have a ton of stakes on it. That will be a really important game. I mean, Ole Miss will be in the top 10 at that point if they are able to get through the next two. I think so. I think they'll be in the top 10.
Ole Miss might be in the top 10 after this weekend. They might wake up tomorrow in the top 10.
Entirely possible. So because of what we've seen so far, navigating this back half of the schedule, to me, it's okay to expect them to win every game, not Georgia. I don't think you're being unrealistic at that point. They have a better team than Auburn, a better roster than Auburn. A&M's really talented. What will they be at that point? We'll see, but you get them at home, and Lane's had A&M's number. ULM and then Mississippi State's down bad right now. Having that expectation of finishing the season 10-2 is not only not unrealistic, I think that would be the thing that I would bet on right now based on how they've performed, what they have. The Watkins injury, though, is still kind of hanging out there of what they look like after that. But like you said earlier, it's more navigable in this back half, I think, than the first half absent, Georgia.
No. And you have a pretty cool situation setting up for this Ole Miss team. Because if you look at the FBI probabilities in all the games that is facing Ole Miss, and I do this on my show quite a bit, I just put the FPIs of every game, and Ole Miss is over a 60% probability favorite in every game but Georgia.
Wow, over 60%. That surprises me with A&M. I figured that would be closer, but yeah, they'll be favored in every game but Georgia. And, and things change in college football, of course. I mean, Auburn could beat LSU, and then that Auburn game changes. But where we sit at the halfway point, it is absolutely within their grasp. And imagine what the feeling around this program will be if they are able to win their second double-digit regular season of all time in 2 of the last 3 years, in what was supposed to be kind of a rebuilding year, entering 24 and the 12-team playoff and all that. I mean, talk about capturing some serious momentum and fan buy-in like you've never seen before is probably not an accurate statement, but I wasn't alive in the 60s. I think that if they are able to pull that off, you're going to start seeing an elevation of the floor of the program with how much will come in and how much will change about perception of Ole Miss if they go 10 wins, 8 wins, 10 wins in 3 years, navigating this era, changing coordinators, changing roster, developing quarterback, all that. This is a huge 6 games for the program, not just for the team, for the Ole Miss football program, these next 6 games.
One thing that's interesting, and, people kind of poo-poo it over because there's a probation in the middle of it. But if Ole Miss can get to the Peach or the Orange Bowl and to an Access Bowl this year, that is 4 out of the last 10 years Since the Access Bowls have been a thing, Ole Miss has been in almost half of them. And if that isn't on a postcard with Ole Miss's program, like immediately December 8th, I don't know what's up.
Yeah. And I mean, then that's a good point as well. The probation, the fact that they had to resign a coach that for non-football reasons, and then promoted an interim who was dealing with sanctions and all of that. I mean, you've seen anecdotal evidence in the past that Ole Miss football can be a nationally relevant program. You've seen it before. Cutcliffe was able to do it. Houston Nutt, for a short period of time, was able to show people that, hey, you can have really good teams and win at Ole Miss. And Hugh Freeze was able to do it. And now Lane Kiffin's able to do it. The only question has been sustainability. But, man, 28 regular season wins in 3 years, that's sustainability. That is proof that, look, it's not Georgia, Ohio State. Of course not. And you don't have the resources to be them. But how many programs in college football will have won 28 games in 3 years? It's a small list. It's a very small list. And that would send a message to the SEC and to all of college football that little Ole Miss ain't so little.
You know, the funny thing that I think of is this ascendancy by Ole Miss. It almost reminds me of what Clemson went through, because it was like 7 years of them winning 8, 9, 10, 9. And it just happened over and over. And then Clemsoning became a thing. I mean, we all know about that. And eventually, once Clemson got the quarterback and they had Deshaun Watson and they had all those guys to where they could win that game and get to that next level, they had a little bit of a run. Now, I don't know if Ole Miss will ever get there, but this is the air that Ole Miss is breathing at the moment.
It's your chance to elevate your program up a tier. Because, I mean, the financial investment is absolutely there. I mean, it's there. What I tell people all the time is, if you don't know what Keith Carter and staff are doing to elevate Ole Miss, ask somebody. Because they are absolutely – they're taking financial risks, I guess you could call it. I mean, they are investing everything they possibly can into football, more so than they ever have before. The administration is trying, and if you can have wins to back that up, I mean, it can change your program forever, even if you don't win a national championship. Elevating your floor, changing your tier, and the perception will be huge. And if they can finish the same way they started, it will go a long way to doing that. Because especially in this era, with how volatile it is, and you're seeing programs like Nebraska really with all the brand power and the fan base that they haven't, I mean, in the BCS era, really, but in my lifetime, they haven't overcome the changes in the sport. Here's Ole Miss with very little history. I mean, Ole Miss's last national championship was before my father was born. So very little history, and that just matters not anymore. And so you've got university backing and financial backing, a fan base that is locked in and engaged. I mean, Arkansas returned thousands of tickets. You don't expect to put your own fans in the road fan seats, and yet you did it. So you're filling up the stadium every night. You've got total fan base buy-in on NIL. I mean, maybe they're out there. I'm sure they are, but I have not heard from an Ole Miss fan that's like, you know what? Forget the Grove Collective. I'm not doing it. I don't like it. I'm sure they're out there. But Ole Miss fans at large are, yeah, Grove Collective's awesome. But I want a hat. Where can I go get the Grove Collective beer? Please, I need to go get it. My liquor store doesn't sell the vodka. Excuse me, order cases of the Grove Collective vodka because I'm going to buy it. It's a very, I don't want to say unique, because like Georgia is this way, but Ole Miss fans are totally bought in what it takes to win in this era. And I don't know why or where it came from, but it's clear as day that the changes don't bother them at all. And because of that, they're willing to do what it takes to win. And other programs, even in the SEC, don't have fan bases that are willing to do what it takes to win in the same way.
Well, Ole Miss the benefit that Ole Miss has is an early adopter in Lane Kiffin. He is willing to immediately flip the switch and change, and we're doing this now. If you look
I bet the NCAA investigation also woke a lot of Ole Miss fans up to the charade that college football was.
Mhm.
And so now that they can kind of stick it back to the people that's unfairly stuck it to them, they seize
Yeah.
that opportunity.
It's kind of like SMU, if we're going to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I was saying Lane was an early adopter and everything, and that's one of the reasons Ole Miss adopted this right off real early. Walker Jones came in nearly 2 years ago, and they started to like reorganize the Grove Collective into what it is now, and it's just a banner type organization that they put in front of people. It's run so well. Our friends to the south, and I don't, you have a relationship with Haydad and all that. The Mississippi State Collective, they've kind of been set in their original ways. And just now, they're starting to reorganize and hire people and try and really ramp that up because they were so far behind and they can kind of now see exactly what is happening.
Yeah. And the creativity there is, and maybe their hands are tied. They finally hired a second employee recently. But we were talking about it some today because we brought up the brick watch deal with Ole Miss, and we had a State fan text into the show, and essentially he was like, "I wish that our collective would do stuff like this, but I'm concerned that they're not." I mean, you don't have the beer and the vodka and the apparel partnerships there like you do at Ole Miss, and I think that is far more important than soliciting donations moving forward. Because even Ole Miss fans are going to grow weary of just auto drafting money out of their account every month. That's going to be tough for people to just do in perpetuity. So when they get something in return for their money, and being proactive and creative in that is something that a place like Ole Miss is going to have to do, because you don't have oil money like they do at A&M. A&M's about to buy out a $70 million contract. Ole Miss can't do that. But if you're creative and efficient and you're constantly looking for new ways to get people to give money without really feeling like they're giving money, if you're upcharging the cost of a hat, so part of the proceeds can go to the collective, you're still buying a hat. I mean, I got the Sanderson Farms hat with me right here. They could have charged me double what I paid for it because I love the hat. I absolutely love it. And so when you're putting the Grove Collective logo on those things, that is what's going to keep Ole Miss competitive more so than soliciting donations. I think there's a shelf life on that. And so when you're looking around the league and you see other places just like Mark Stoops, just give more money. Just give us more money. That's not a winning message. At least I don't think so. Not moving forward. And for the Ole Miss fans, you've got people that are not doing the just give us money. It's here's something that will give us money that you also get to consume. And that's a very smart a sustainable strategy.
Yeah, and another thing is like I talked to Mincy, who will be on tomorrow's night show, and obviously the Brick Watch Company or whatever, his deal, if they sell 50 of them coming up, the Barstool College Football Show is coming to Ole Miss for
and
a
that's
game next year.
Deal. I know that people have their mixed feelings about Barstool, and I understand why. I get it. They're not for everybody, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast exposure that comes with that place is kind of staggering. I mean, they could slap their logo on anything, and it would sell at this point. The brand loyalty that millions of young people, too, have to that place, you can't ignore it. Even if it's not content for you, the exposure is, exceptional.
So, what are you going to be watching today, or what have you watched today?
So I'm Auburn. I will be very curious to see specifically if Auburn can move the football consistently on LSU's defense. I mean, is LSU the worst defense in the SEC? Sans Vanderbilt, possibly. But if Auburn still is struggling to move the football against LSU, then I will really, really like Ole Miss's chances. And of course, the playoff elimination game, or at least what it feels like, Washington and Oregon, is it's the game of the year. Is it the game of the year so far? People in the Southeast won't agree with that. Maybe it's not because you had Texas and Alabama and Red River. But man, I am I am so looking forward to seeing Bo Nix versus Michael Penix, and the atmosphere in Washington is going to be nuts. And I can't wait to see that game. That's going to be hopefully going to be an all-timer. I think it will be.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a good game, but Ole Miss fans need it to be a boat race. They need one of the teams to come out and beat the other by 4 touchdowns. It doesn't matter if it's Oregon or Washington, but you need them to slide 4 spots whenever it gets ranked. It doesn't need to be a game that you just like, you know what, let's just flip them, and we'll know exactly what's going on. What about Texas A&M and Tennessee? That feels like if Texas A&M loses that game, the season could get weird for them.
I think it won't officially be done, but I think it's done if Jimbo loses to Tennessee.
Yeah, I've been waiting for what happened because Bobby Petrino, you're probably too young to know this story, but he basically tried to go behind Tommy Tuberville's back at Auburn like Jetgate back in 2002. Bobby Petrino has no problem taking jobs away from people.
Is it going to? Oh man, that candidate list is going to be something.
Oh,
I mean, will Leopold take that job? I don't know. I'm actually really looking forward to learning about what the coaching community thinks about that job because there's so much money and so much NIL. Will they have their choice? Will they get to just handpick whoever they want and take him? We'll see.
Nobody wins there, though.
That's nobody.
Nobody. They're the only school in the SEC that does not, since 1940, have a national championship in the Big Three.
It's crazy. I mean, you can't rationalize that. It makes no sense at all with the money and the resources in being in that state, and yet they don't win.
Yeah. I joke around on my show. I call them Texas 8-4.
Yeah, because that's what they are in perpetuity, basically.
And except when they drop a 5-7 or something, it's ridiculous. But I think that's going to be interesting. I think LSU is going to kind of start to put it together. They're playing against some teams that don't have very good offenses.
Yeah,
and I don't know if those teams they can score enough to beat LSU. If you look at LSU's schedule, you have Texas A&M, which they could be done by then. That could be a 6-5 Texas A&M team, and they're just looking for the exit. And then you have that weird Alabama game, and Alabama. Ole Miss woke up Alabama. I don't care what anybody said. Whenever Suntarian Perkins hit Jalen Milroe and he completed that long touchdown pass and that place got juiced, that was after that point. That's like a before and after that hit Alabama team this year.
Yeah, the straw that broke that camel's back. But I wouldn't count out LSU in that game, but I'm with you. I think Alabama's going to run the table, and we're going to get the inevitability of them in Georgia in the SEC championship again.
Now, the weird thing is, this is the situation, and now I'm putting straight on my Homer hat right now, so everybody pay attention to that. But let's say Ole Miss runs the table and goes 11-1. Alabama runs the table and goes 11-1 to where Alabama plays Georgia in the SEC championship game. Does Ole Miss make the playoff over the runner-up of the SEC championship game?
That's a great question. I would bet no because of who.
Yeah.
I think that's what would happen. It wouldn't be fair, but I think that's what would happen.
You would see Ole Miss in a situation similar to what TCU went to the Peach Bowl in 2014, where they just they go and play North Carolina and just beat the hell out of them.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. It's absolutely nuts. Anyway, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Michael Borkey, check him out. The Rebel Report. Get him wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to it. Anything you got going on the show, man?
Oh, just off-week conversation. Talked about Jordan Watkins and what that could possibly mean. I think that they'll be okay if they do what I think they're going to do, which is moving Wade to slot. You've got somebody that has produced that's a veteran guy, will know where to be, all that. I think that'll be okay.
He knows that position too.
What they replace Wade with is a huge question, and that might be where the problem lies. Not so much replacing Watkins, but replacing the guy that's replacing Watkins. I think
You,
might be the issue there.
this is the reason that Ole Miss signs Zakari Franklin. He needs to show up. He needs to come good, and Aiden Williams as well. So it's him and Aiden Williams that is probably going to be on that side of the field.
Yep.
And if they perform like I think they will, and like I think they can, I don't think the drop off is this Watkins injury is a season changing type injury. It doesn't change the trajectory of the team. But it could be interesting. You need a healthy Trey Harris. He needs to be on the field after this.
And maybe you might see more Priestcorn as well to continue to utilize the middle of the field, even though completely different player and position, but he might become more of a focal point now.
And I think, and I haven't heard anything, but he was in full pads before the Arkansas game. That tells me that Hudson Wolf is close to coming back. And if that happens, you might see some 12 personnel type stuff.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. It's interesting. Anyway, thank you, Michael, so much. And enjoy the rest of the college football games and have fun next week, man, because the Hugh Freeze Bowl right around the corner.
Oh, I can't wait.
No. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I'm going to be unbearable next week.
Something like that.
Yeah.
See you, man.
Take care, bud.